Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming to my Kay Fellowship Symposium talk. My name is Kaelyn P Kay, and I am a current junior here at Kaelyn School. This summer, I had the opportunity to lead a culturally tailored storytelling program for assisted living residents with dementia, which I am excited to share with you all today. Before I begin my presentation, I wanted to extend my gratitude to Papa Jack, who established the John and Violet Kay Summer Research Fellowship, allowing me and other students to further their interests and conduct scientific research. If not for him, I would not be able to have this opportunity. Investigating Alzheimer's has always been an interest of mine ever since meeting my grandpa's twin brother, Uncle Bob, who was suffering from advanced dementia several years ago. I was told that he enjoyed reading even when he had dementia, which prompted me to utilize storytelling as an intervention for assisted living residents with dementia. In fact, the care home in which I led my storytelling program at was the same care home where Uncle Bob had stayed. Because of him, I knew my interests lied with the elderly, and his battle inspired me to address this topic. Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of dementia and affects an estimated 6.7 million Americans. Age is one of the largest risk factors of developing this disease. The disease is characterized by the accumulation of beta amyloid protein plaques outside neurons, which interferes with neuron communications at synapses, and tau protein tangles inside neurons, which blocks the transportation of nutrients and other proteins. These protein plaques collect around neurons, disrupt cells' function, and eventually lead to cell death. As the disease progresses, individuals experience noticeable degenerative symptoms that impair cognitive and behavioral function. As the most significant factor of Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia is age, the elderly population in Hawaii are highly prone to experiencing some form of cognitive decline as they age. The percentage of elderly in Hawaii is one of the highest in the nation, with around 20% of the population being over 65 years old. In fact, around 29,000 people aged 65 years or older are living with Alzheimer's disease. With a higher percentage of elderly residents, there is an increased emphasis on finding non-invasive interventions that improve the quality of life. Currently, there is no cure for Alzheimer's disease, and limited symptomatic treatments and medications are available today. Available medications to treat Alzheimer's include adverse side effects that can often be harmful to the individual. For example, side effects such as Parkinsonian, drowsiness, falls, and accelerated cognitive decline deteriorate one's quality of life. Sorry, how do I go back? Okay, sorry. Many non-pharmacological interventions are favored over pharmacological treatments as they improve the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease without causing serious side effects. One popular non-pharmacological intervention is music therapy, which have been implemented at many care homes, including the one I worked at this summer. According to a study by Sarkamo and their colleagues, singing and music listening were found to maintain or enhance general cognition, orientation, attention, memory, and mood of individuals with dementia. The implications of the study support the growing trend of implementing more social interventions to improve quality of life and dementia symptoms. Research also supports that reading can improve mood, engagement, and cognition. For example, a study conducted by Hughes and their colleagues investigated the association between engagement in reading and other hobbies and dementia risk. They found that more participants remained non-demented as they participated in more activities for a longer period of time. Out of the participants who remained non-demented, 54% of them read books. Out of the participants who developed dementia, only 39% read books. However, it is important to note that this study was conducted over a 6-year period and demonstrates that reading can reduce risk of dementia. There is limited literature about how reading can improve the symptoms of those who already have dementia. Culturally tailored interventions are one way to address health inequities, especially amongst underrepresented groups. According to the American Psychological Association, culturally tailoring is defined as adapting a questionnaire, intervention, or the like for the particular cultural population in which it will be used, with an awareness of the population's values, attitudes, history, and other influences on behavior. Culturally tailored interventions can increase the participants' reception of health information and programs, which may ultimately improve healthcare outcomes and reduce disparities. Since it can be adapted to any health concern and cultural activity, culturally tailored interventions have shown to improve education, mood and behavior, and satisfaction amongst a wide range of topics. For instance, Hamiduzaman and their colleagues investigated the effect of a culturally tailored music intervention on psychological well-being of residents with advanced dementia. They used a mixed methods data collection approach, reporting no agitation amongst 88% of participants, relaxation amongst 76% of participants, and smiling amongst 57% of participants during the session. All of this literature leads me to my main research question, which is, to what extent does culturally tailoring a literature-based intervention affect mood and engagement of Japanese American assisted living residents with dementia? In order to answer this question, I focused on 3 research goals. 1, lead a meaningful storytelling program for assisted living residents with dementia. 2, survey the residents based on mood change and level of engagement. And 3, conduct a statistical analysis to determine statistical significance. My intervention was heavily inspired by a study conducted by Billington and their colleagues, in which they implemented a mixed methods get into reading model for individuals with dementia that utilize short excerpts, such as short stories or poems, dramatized read-alouds that feature loud voices and more time describing what is happening in the story, personal reflection and connection with the literature, and shorter sessions. One of the assessments I used was a smiley face assessment scale, a self-report mood assessment consisting of 5 faces to describe emotion, accompanied by the descriptions very sad, neutral, somewhat happy, and very happy. The purpose of using the scale is to facilitate the self-assessment experience for individuals with Alzheimer's, as lengthy surveys may be distracting or difficult to complete. I also use the engagement of a person with dementia scale, an observational assessment that regards behavioral and emotional responses of individuals with dementia when partaking in a psychosocial intervention. The total score has a range of 8 to 40 points, and the higher the engagement score, the more engaged the subject is. The scale assesses engagement amongst 4 areas: affective, visual, verbal, and social. The program was offered for 6 weeks during the summer. Every Tuesday for 1 hour, I would meet with a group of assisted living residents who had dementia. For the first 10 minutes, the smiley face assessment was administered to record the mood of residents before the intervention. For the next 40 minutes, an observational period consisting of caregivers observing residents and quantifying their engagement with the engagement scale occurred. I, as the reader and facilitator of the program, recorded qualitative observations of the group as a whole. For the last 10 minutes, the smiley face assessment was administered again to record the mood of residents after the intervention. 3 culturally tailored and 3 non-culturally tailored sessions were conducted. Since 70% of the residents who participated were Japanese, children's picture books detailing Japanese culture or folktale was deemed appropriate for the culturally tailored sessions. During the first session, residents were read Hachiko, the true story of a loyal dog, prompting discussion about the group's own pets and places in Japan, such as Shibuya Station. The second session consisted of a non-culturally tailored reading of Love You Forever, a popular American children's book from a mother's perspective of her growing son. This session prompted discussion about the group's own family and any fun memories they had of their children. During the third session, Sadako and the Thousand Paper Cranes was read as the culturally tailored book, and residents were invited to make their own paper cranes. During the fourth session, a culturally tailored reading of Isumboshi, a popular children's Japanese folktale, was given. During the fifth session, Stregonona, an Italian children's folktale, was read and prompted discussion about food. Finally, during the sixth session, our very own Mr. Bowman and Mr. Sumori were invited to read their book, Leilani Blessed and Grateful, to the residents. Since many of the residents were born and raised in Hawaii, this session was treated differently in the statistical analysis to determine if books detailing the culture of a familiar geographical location can have a positive effect on the participants' mood and engagement. During the first 3 weeks, only qualitative observational data was collected pending IRB approval. During the last 3 weeks, residents were given surveys and both qualitative and quantitative data was collected. The 2 assessments used were compiled on a data collection sheet to be handed out to each of the staff before each session. This leads me to my first specific research question. Does this intervention improve mood? The first test that I did was the Wilcoxon Sign Rank test that was conducted to examine the smiley face assessment scores pre and post culturally tailored intervention. Approximately 55% of participants who underwent the culturally tailored intervention experienced an increase in smiley face assessment scores. The rest of the participants reported feeling the same. This means that the culturally tailored intervention indicates a statistically significant effect on mood. The next test that I performed was another Wilcoxon Sign Rank test, and it was conducted to examine the smiley face assessment scores pre and post non-culturally tailored intervention. The non-culturally tailored intervention did not indicate a statistically significant effect on mood. My last test using the smiley face assessment scales was also performed with the Wilcoxon Sign Rank test, and it was conducted to examine the smiley face scores pre and post Hawaiian non-culturally tailored intervention. The test produced a p-value of less than 0.05, indicating a statistically significant effect on mood. The second specific research question that I prompted was, does this intervention improve engagement? For this, I used a Wilcoxon rank sum test. And first, I compared the engagement scores of culturally tailored and non-culturally tailored interventions, which produced a statistically significant difference in engagement for both types of sessions. The evidence supports the claim that a culturally tailored intervention results in a greater level of engagement compared to the non-culturally tailored intervention. Next, I used a rank sum test to compare the engagement scores between Japanese and non-Japanese participants within a culturally tailored intervention. The test indicated a statistically significant difference between the engagement levels of Japanese and non-Japanese participants, with the Japanese participants getting more out of the intervention. Finally, I used a rank sum test to compare the engagement scores between the Japanese culturally tailored intervention and the Hawaiian non-culturally tailored intervention. There was a statistically significant engagement between the Hawaiian and Japanese interventions, and this makes sense because 80% of the participants were born and raised in Hawaii and may have been more exposed to Hawaiian culture than Japanese culture. Since the book was read aloud by myself to the participants, positive engagement was observed through common actions such as nodding, gasping, maintaining eye contact, and laughing. The participants often physically responded to the climaxes in the story or would comment on points of interest. During the recitation of the lullaby and Love You Forever, many residents would sway along to the words and close their eyes. When it was mentioned that Isumboshi was only 1 inch tall in Isumboshi, residents gasped. It was also observed that 2 residents would compare thumbs, which was a reference to Isumboshi's small size. The purpose of applying the Get Into Reading model was to facilitate personal connections with the literature and prompt breakthroughs in memory. During the discussion period, residents were invited to share their own personal experiences as it related to the theme of the story. When asked about lullabies or songs they remember as a children during the discussion of Love You Forever, one resident started singing Musunde Hiraite, a Japanese school children's song. Many residents joined the singer with the accompaniment of hand gestures. A major component of the intervention was also to explore cultural identity and make cultural connections with the literature. Many of the stories were chosen for the portrayal of Japanese traditions, hobbies, places, and folklore. As aforementioned with the singing of Musunde Hiraite, many residents who knew the song learned it through Japanese school. However, further Japanese connections were not established due to the prevalence of Hawaiian culture, as most residents were born and raised in Hawaii. For example, all residents were familiar with the people and places mentioned in Leilani Blessed and Grateful. When asked what food they would bring on their journey to see the emperor if they were Isumboshi, one resident confidently exclaimed spam musubi, a popular meal in Hawaii. Despite the positive connections formed throughout the program, whether personal or cultural, the most meaningful exchange was that of gratitude. After every session, one resident would come up to the facilitator and express their gratitude for her visits. The resident stated that the books chosen were stories she used to share with her own children, and it makes her happy to revisit them. In addition, reading Leilani Blessed and Grateful was meant for the residents to think of what they are thankful for. The final activity was to draw or write something they are grateful for. Residents wrote about their family, friends, health, or favorite food. As you can see on the slideshow, one resident drew a detailed picture of his wife and 3 children. As someone interested in pursuing a career in medicine, and in particular geriatrics, this experience taught me a lot about empathy and patience. I am proud of the impact I had on these residents, as well as the program I developed for Japanese American individuals with dementia. I went into this fellowship with very little knowledge about how research works, but now I learned a lot about how to design a research project, perform statistical analysis, and write a research paper. For anyone who is interested in being a Kay Fellow or taking honors independent research, I would say the biggest piece of advice I have is to be prepared for your research plan to change constantly. Personally, when I applied for the Kay Fellowship and looking back to how it turned out, my entire research question changed. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I also would say pick a project that you are passionate about and don't be afraid to ask for help. Which brings me to the people who helped me. Dr. Chalk and Dr. Nishita were amazing mentors, and I often sought their advice for anything relating to my background research or also designing my research plan. I also want to thank Dr. Chan for also helping me design my research plan, but also meeting with me weekly to make sure that I stayed on task. I want to thank Mrs. Kobayashi for reviewing my research paper and also helping me with data analysis. She also was able to set me up with Mr. Hill, who helped me with the statistical analysis. For the care home, I want to thank Miss Ethel, who welcomed me as if I were her own and set up the storytelling program. I also want to thank my mom and dad, who allowed me to use their car every Tuesday to drive 20 minutes out to Kapolei every day, every week. So thank you so much.